You won't believe what just happened on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Conan O'Brien, a legend of late-night television, shocked the nation by erupting in anger and confronting Stephen Colbert live on air. At 62, Conan held nothing back, his words cutting like a knife as he accused Stephen of fueling division for ratings. The tension in the Los Angeles studio in 2025 was so thick you could feel it through the screen, and the moment Conan ripped off his microphone and stormed off the show left viewers in stunned silence. Before we dive into this explosive story, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to catch the hottest updates. The crowd erupted in applause as Conan, slightly awkwardly, strode onto the stage, his signature pompadour faintly wilted under the studio lights, his wide smile carrying a hint of caution from a man who'd survived the brutal twists of network politics. They shook hands, Conan's long fingers enveloping Stephen's, and settled into their chairs, the audience's laughter still humming like a warm blanket over the room. The first few minutes were classic late-night fare. Stephen lobbed easy questions about Conan's podcast, Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, and his recent HBO Max travel shows, each joke landing with the practiced ease of two men who knew the rhythm of this dance. Conan's self-deprecating humor, quips about his Irish pallor, and being too tall for Zoom calls, drew chuckles, especially from the older audience, who saw in him a relic of a less polarized era when late night was about absurdity, not agendas. Stephen leaned forward, elbows on the desk, and shifted to a weightier topic. Conan's recent podcast comments about the state of political discourse in America. "You said something interesting last week," Stephen began, his tone light but his eyes narrowing slightly, "about how comedians are being forced to pick sides in this cultural tug-of-war. Care to elaborate for the folks at home?" The question seemed innocent, but there was a glint in Stephen's gaze, a subtle challenge only someone like Conan, who'd spent decades reading subtext, could catch. The audience, sensing the shift, quieted, their plastic cups crinkling in their hands. Conan leaned back, crossing his long legs, and ran a hand through his hair, a gesture betraying a flicker of unease. "Look, Stephen, I've been in this game long enough to know comedy's supposed to cut through the noise, not add to it," he said, his voice steady but laced with a faint Boston accent that surfaced when he was serious. "I grew up in an Irish Catholic family where you argued politics at the dinner table, but you didn't hate each other afterward. Now? It's like we're all auditioning for a cage match instead of a conversation." The audience murmured approval, especially the older viewers, nodding at memories of a time when Thanksgiving didn't end in a Twitter feud. Stephen tilted his head, his smile tightening. "That's a nice sentiment, Conan, but isn't that a bit naive? I mean, you're talking about a world where people could ignore systemic issues, like racial injustice, because they weren't forced to confront them. Comedy's always been political. You're not saying we should go back to just doing pratfalls, are you?" The jab was subtle, wrapped in Stephen's trademark wit, but it landed like a pebble in a still pond, ripples spreading through the studio. Conan's smile faltered, his pale blue eyes narrowing as he sensed the trap. The air conditioning hummed, a low drone that seemed to amplify the tension. "I'm not saying ignore the issues," Conan replied, his voice sharpening. "But there's a difference between shining a light and pouring gasoline. You and I both know half the country tunes out when they feel like they're being preached to." The audience shifted in their seats, some clapping, others exchanging glances, sensing the conversation veering into uncharted territory for late night. Stephen leaned forward, his fingers steepled, the studio lights glinting off his wedding ring. "So we just tiptoe around the tough stuff? Like, say, the 2020 protests? Or how certain networks, you know the ones, keep stoking division?" He paused, letting the question hang, and the crowd's murmurs grew louder, a mix of agreement and discomfort. Conan's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching under his freckled skin. He'd been in this game too long to miss the bait. Stephen was nudging him toward a political minefield where a misstep could alienate half his fan base. "I'm not defending anyone," Conan said, his voice measured but edged with sharpness. "But I think people are tired of being told what to think. They want to laugh, not be lectured. You don't need a focus group to know that." The audience laughed, but it was a nervous sound, like the crackle of static before a storm. Stephen's smile didn't waver, but his eyes turned cold, assessing. He reached under his desk and pulled out a tablet, swiping to a screenshot of a post on X from 2 weeks prior, when Conan had retweeted a clip of a comedian set at a comedy club, captioned, "This is what free speech looks like." The comedian's jokes were about wokeness in Hollywood, and the post had sparked a firestorm with accusations of Conan endorsing problematic views. Stephen turned the tablet toward the audience, the screen's glow casting harsh shadows on his face. "This post caused quite a stir, Conan. Some folks said you were signaling something here. Care to clarify?" The crowd's reaction was mixed. Gasps, a few claps, and a low hum of whispers. Conan's face flushed, not with the rosy blush of embarrassment, but the slow burn of anger. He leaned forward, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair, knuckles white. "That's not what I was doing, Stephen, and you know it," he said, his voice low but firm. "I shared a clip of a guy making people laugh, not a manifesto. You're cherry-picking to make a point." The accusation hung in the air, sharp and unmistakable, and the studio fell silent, save for the faint hum of the cameras. The tension escalated as Stephen didn't back down. He swiped to another screenshot, this time a thread on X from a journalist who'd unearthed a 2005 late-night segment where Conan joked about affirmative action in a way that, in hindsight, felt tone-deaf. The thread, with over 10,000 reposts, accused Conan of perpetuating stereotypes and questioned why he hadn't addressed it since. Stephen read a snippet aloud, his voice calm but cutting. "Conan's been coasting on nostalgia while dodging accountability." "Strong words, Conan. What do you say to that?" The audience was now divided, some booing the quote, others nodding, their faces lit by the soft glow of their phones as they scrolled X in real time. Conan's eyes darted to the tablet, then back to Stephen, his expression a mix of disbelief and betrayal. "You're really going there, huh?" he said, his voice rising, the Irish lilt more pronounced. "That was 20 years ago, Stephen. I was 42 trying to fill 60 minutes of airtime with a skeleton crew and a network breathing down my neck. You want to talk accountability? How about when your show edited a guest's comments to sound more liberal than they were? I've got receipts too." He pulled out his phone, fumbling slightly, and held up a screenshot of an email from a producer who worked on The Late Show in 2022, alleging selective editing to shape the narrative. The crowd gasped, the sound sharp and collective, like air escaping a balloon. Stephen's smile vanished, his lips pressing into a thin line, his fingers drumming on the desk. A nervous tick he hadn't shown on air in years. The studio felt smaller, the air heavy with the scent of sweat and anticipation, the audience's phones glowing like fireflies as they recorded the unfolding moment. The confrontation teetered on the edge of chaos. Stephen, regaining his composure, leaned back and said, "Conan, this isn't about me. It's about whether people like us, with platforms, can keep pretending neutrality is an option when the country's this divided." His voice was calm, but the accusation was clear. Conan's reluctance to pick a side was complicity. Conan shot back, "And you think turning your show into a soapbox helps? You're not bridging divides, you're profiting off them." The words landed like a slap, and the audience erupted, some cheering, others shouting, the sound a chaotic blend of support and outrage. The stage manager signaled for a commercial break, but the cameras kept rolling, capturing Conan's flushed face and Stephen's steely glare. As the show cut to ads, the conflict spilled onto X, where clips of the exchange were already going viral. A post from @TVInsider read, "Conan O'Brien calls out Stephen Colbert for profiting off division on Nasher Late Show. Did he go too far?" With 15,000 reposts in minutes. Another from @Justice, now 2025, accused Conan of defending the status quo, linking to the 2005 clip and racking up 8,000 likes. The older audience, many tuning in for nostalgia, sat stunned, their faces a mix of shame for the public spat and sympathy for either Conan, ambushed, or Stephen, holding a mirror to his guest. The studio's air grew stale, the laughter gone, replaced by the low hum of whispered debates among the crowd. When the show resumed, the tension was palpable but restrained. Both returned to a restrained professionalism, their smiles fragile. Off-air, the repercussions were immediate. X was ablaze with hashtags like Conan vs. Colbert and Late Night Feud, dividing along predictable lines, some calling Conan a coward for avoiding hard truths, others praising him for resisting the dogma of wokeness. An article in Variety published an hour after the broadcast quoted unnamed sources as claiming that CBS executives were furious with Stephen for escalating the interview, while Conan's team missed the information that he was caught off guard by the tablet stunt. Older audiences, especially those over 55, felt the sting most acutely. A mixture of anger at the loss of late-night TV's charm as an escape from reality and sadness at a world where even comedians couldn't get along. However, amidst the noise, a small thread on X by @Common Ground LA, the community organizer, gained momentum. Conan and Colbert are not enemies. They are us arguing without hearing each other. Maybe it's time to listen instead of shouting. It had only 500 reposts, but it struck a chord, a faint hope that public spectacle might provoke deeper reconsideration. The lights in the studio dimmed, the audience spilled out into the Los Angeles night, and the hum of the city car horns. Distant sirens drowned out their whispers.